You're listening to NIL Now, a podcast dedicated to the name, image, and likeness of today's college and high school athletes.
So we're going to explore the crazy and wildly interesting world of name, image, and likeness.
NIL Now, covering the latest sports business headlines and keeping you informed on the nation's top performers. This is NIL Now, where the stars of tomorrow are getting noticed today.
It's the Wild Wild West, but we're wrangling it in.
Presented by Headline Studio and Reddit. Here are your hosts, Lauren Zisler and Kevin Jones.
What is up, NIL friends? Welcome back to another episode 5. This production brought to you by Headline Studio and Reddit. We're glad you can join us as we explore the wild and crazy world of name, image, and likeness. It's been a fun ride. I know we're still in our infancy, but having a good time, enjoying the ride along the way alongside my co-host, former Virginia Tech All-American running back and NFL first-round draft pick to the Detroit Lions. That's Kevin Jones, a.k.a. KJ. KJ, what's up?
Yo.
How you feeling, man?
What's up?
You know, I'm thankful. It is Thanksgiving week. I'm thankful for you, Kevin, and thankful for this podcast and just getting to explore this world together.
Absolutely. It's been good so far, so just looking forward to, visiting our guests and getting on here with Dean and you every week. It's been good, so I look forward to it every week.
All right, so we're going to jump into headlines, but I do want to mention, of course, we'll have Bobak on here momentarily, but also want to mention we're excited for our guest today, Doug Lemerises. He's a sports columnist for Cleveland.com and the host of Buckeye Talk podcast. So I feel like we're theming well right now with, rivalry week. Say that 3 times real quick, Kevin. Rivalry week, rivalry week, rivalry week.
Rivalry week. Rivalry week. Yeah, that's hard. It sounded easy, but as soon as I tried it, my mouth got twisted.
Yeah, it don't work too well. So we are in rivalry week, and it's gonna be a good time. All right, so let's jump into these headlines, Kevin, shall we?
Let's do it.
NIL headlines.
Number 1, Jaden Rashada committed to Miami for NIL money, then flipped to Florida when the Hurricanes started losing. So the sources told On3 that Life Wallet, led by billionaire Hurricanes booster John Ruiz, offered Rashada a $9.5 million NIL deal. But then Miami started losing, most notably to Middle Tennessee and Duke. And then Rashada flipped his commitment from Miami to Florida on November 11th. So sources did tell On3 that Florida offered Rashada an $11 million NIL deal before he committed, backed by Gator Collective. In his commitment video, Rashada posed with a Lamborghini loaned to the school by Hugh Hathcock, who runs the Gator Guard Collective at UF. So interesting story, and I've always kind of wondered what happens when there's money on the line, money on the table, you're committed to a team, and then all of a sudden you decide to back out of that. How does that work in the NIL world with these contracts? And I'm assuming there's some safeguarding on both sides so that there's protection, because again, the money is there, but there's also got to be a performance aspect to it as well, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty much kind of like a contracted worker where, a guy or gal could, end their services and then the payment ends. So pretty black and white like that. You're not going to get a lump sum of money and then not do the services. So it's kind of like just a normal contractor agreement. A lot of times is what I'm seeing is a commonplace in this NIL space. I'm pretty sure when he decommitted and decided that he was going to not go there anymore, if he was getting any payments, then they just stop immediately and then it moves on to the next thing. But I think this also shows, though, that in the NIL space, that everything is not just about the money. It's funny because you said that in Miami, what I heard you read, the story said that in Miami it was a $9-point-something million deal, and then at University of Florida it was an 11. But then when you read further into what someone at University of Florida said, is that he would have made more money at the University of Miami. So it's like, in that case, a guy is probably cutting his losses and thinking, okay, well, I still want to win. So right now, because of the records happening at Miami, I think winning is still important. The coaches that you're going to play for is still important. Branding and also that university's tradition, alumni, all of that is still important. Just NIL piled on top of that is another feature. So I don't think it's always the deciding factor, especially it's kind of like comps when you're looking at a house. It's like, okay, is this house in this neighborhood better than that house in that neighborhood? And then the cost and all those things. So, it's kind of good to see in a way, because it's like, all right, for him, he can weigh the other things and not really think about the NIL piece as much, because they're similar. The deals are similar, so you can really just go play where you want to play.
That's such a good point. And I do think that those things do come into question. And so, what is at stake? And yes, money talks, but let's be real in terms of shelf life, longevity. Where do you have your best chances? Where are you going to have the best chance to succeed? Because you got to think long term too. It's not just about your college career. If you have hopes, dreams, goals, and aspirations and play in the league, and those are still intact, you certainly have to play into that. And obviously the culture of the team and what you think is best for your overall career, not just short term, long term. So I think that's a great point. I love the analogy there with the houses and the comps. Like, so great.
He also mentioned that he doesn't really want to be a quarterback on a team that's trying to rebuild. I would say kudos to him for, somebody has to do it, but kudos to him for kind of making that decision. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm stuck. This is what I want to do. So, I'm all for people making educated, sound decisions. Now, obviously, I would hate that if he was at Virginia Tech and was deciding to go somewhere else.
True. That is true.
But I still commend him for, being brave enough to be like, all right, like, this is what I see happening, and this is not what I want to do, even though he's going to get a lot of flack from it, from fans and things like that. I'm still proud of him for at least making a sound decision, it sounds like to me.
Yeah. And at that age too, maturity plays a factor, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so hopefully it sounds like he's had some people advising him to help him in that process as well. So good stuff there. Now, headline number 2, this one's a fun one. So Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett changes his nickname from the mailman to the milkman for an ad with the Georgia Dairy Alliance. This is brilliant, in my opinion.
I think it's brilliant. I liked it too.
So in this commercial, it's cute. So he takes the podium at a press conference. He announces he's changing his nickname. He says, yes, the mailman delivers, but sometimes you get junk mail, and I want to deliver great things every time I'm on the field. So from now on, I've decided I'll be the milkman. I thought that was pretty cool. And Kevin, do you know the backstory on why he was nicknamed the mailman to begin with?
I actually don't know the backstory on that. Do you?
So he was known as the mailman because he wore a U.S. postal worker hat to recruiting showcases as a high schooler.
I have a side note backstory to that. I am officially the first player to have fun with the decisions on what school to go to, where I did a jersey thing, and then after that, other players started doing the hat thing and switcheroos on the hats and stuff like that. So I started that.
Okay, so
on signing day.
Tell me what that looked like.
So people I think automatically thought that I was going to Penn State. Penn State, Virginia Tech were my final 2, but I was Penn State, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Tennessee, and University of Florida. But people thought that I was going to Penn State because I'm from Pennsylvania and I had a blue sweater on at my press conference. But my press conference, I had the sweater on because I went to a Catholic high school and we had to wear a uniform. So I just so happened to be wearing the blue one that day because it was clean. If I didn't wear that one, the other funny thing is that the other sweater is maroon. So it just would have been flipped to people would have thought Virginia Tech. I literally went in the restroom before my press conference, and my close friend was asking me, "Hey, what you gonna do? What you gonna do?" And I said, "I don't know. We're gonna flip a coin." So I flipped the coin, and the coin was Virginia Tech. So I was like, "That's where I'm going to Tech." So when we came out to the press conference, I had a duffel bag. I pulled off my sweater, and I said, "No." I pulled out a jersey out of my duffel bag, and I said, "I will not be attending Penn State," and it was the Penn State jersey. And then I took off my sweater and said I will be going to Virginia Tech, and I had a Michael Vick jersey on underneath of that. So, yeah, it was a gasp in the room, like, oh. I was like, oh, this is serious.
I love that. That is so good. And so you kind of created the wave because we've seen these commitment videos and these a lot of more drama.
I wasn't trying to start anything. It was like I was just having fun with my decision day. And I think a few years ago, somebody wrote an article and was like, Kevin Jones started this, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, somebody actually remembered that. That was like in 2000.
Hey, someone's got to start the fire. I love it. I think that's cool. That's a cool story. I love that.
So this commercial brought me back to that.
It's such a big decision that these guys have to make. And obviously it's cool that Stetson can have fun with it. And, I think it's cool that these companies and brands are coming out with, different ways to really bring attention and use maybe current topics or current things that are central to a particular player's image or brand or whatever it is, nicknames, that sort of thing, to kind of play off of that. And in many ways, not necessarily poke fun at themselves, but be able to say, hey, you know what, let's tie this in. Like for the Dairy Alliance to do that, I think is pretty funny. So, all right. So let me give us our final one before we hop into our next segment with Bobak. And I love this one. It's Thanksgiving. It's that time of year where it's so great to hear these stories of people being able to give back to the community, give back to, people around the world that need our help, that need help from other people. And this one comes from Michigan running back Blake Corum, who invested money he made from name, image, and likeness deals into Thanksgiving turkeys. So for the second year in a row, he delivered turkeys to families in Michigan, in that Michigan community that he purchased using NIL earnings. This year, he distributed 300 turkeys, and that's despite recovering from the knee injury that he had back on Saturday in Saturday's game. And so you see pictures of him walking around, delivering these turkeys, big smile on his face. I think stories like these always warm my heart.
Yeah, no, this story is right on time. Obviously, he's expressing how, that he's grateful to be a part of that community, but then also even after the injury, where he has personal, letdowns happening, and still out there serving the community and feeding people that are, hungry, who don't have the opportunity. So I think it's a humbling thing. It's good to see a running back doing it as a fellow running back. But no, this is a great story.
Of course, a happy Thanksgiving to all of you all out there. We appreciate you. And now we're going to hop on into our next segment.
NIL Headlines.
All right, now it's time to bring in our good friend, Bobak Hayeri. He helps run our CFB, the home of college football, on Reddit, as well as at Reddit CFB. That's on Twitter. And great to have you here, Bobak. Of course, these headlines just keep rolling in, and, we're in rivalry week right now in college football. And so that makes it even more fun. Before I get to you, I do want to ask Kevin, you played in a lot of rivalry games, obviously Virginia Tech and UVA being one of them, which sadly that game was canceled this week, and our thoughts and prayers going out to the families there at UVA, having gone through what they have, to see the families kind of come together in such a difficult situation. And I know your condolences have been out there with those families as well. What makes rivalry week so special, though? I mean, it's something like nothing else.
Well, it's kind of like being in a family where you have kids that, have at two different universities. I think the in-state rivalries are special because, you have 50% over here, 50% over there. So like Virginia Tech and UVA is probably our biggest in-state rival. Again, shout out to the team there and condolences to the families. But, rivalry week is special. Our game actually got canceled this weekend because of the tragedies over there. Our heart and prayers goes out to them. In normal circumstances, this week would be turned up. It's Thanksgiving week, so it's one of those games that in state that everybody tunes in to watch. So, it'll be missed this week, but we can tune into some other games. But shout out to UVA again.
Absolutely. Thoughts and prayers with them. And so one big rivalry we're tracking, and we're always tracking this last week of the season, Ohio State and Michigan. They're going to be playing in Columbus this weekend. And oh, by the way, the Buckeye and Wolverine alums, along with current players, competed in a Fortnite tournament on Sunday. So this tournament featured 8 teams from Michigan, 8 teams from Ohio State. Each team featured a current school athlete, a former athlete, a current member of the school's esports team, and a professional esports player on social media influencer. Bobak, take me through this. I mean, this is a pretty epic event that obviously had some money at stake. So take us through sort of this whole big event that was put on and the epic proportion that it was, because we all know Fortnite is kind of the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just kind of an interesting idea. I hope we see more things like this because it's fun to see that blend of traditional college sports with the rise of esports. And, it blends with a lot of interests in, folks today. I'm not going to say younger people because people, 40 and under, I think, know what this is all about. So you have a game like Fortnite. There was a great idea to kind of combine it with this tournament, as you said, bringing in some prominent esports folks, bringing in alumni and current players, doing a tournament with $55,000 on the line, and integrating that into name, image, likeness, and compensating the players who are participating. So not only do they get to do something players like to do already, which is, play games. Gosh, I remember going to Big 12 media days before the pandemic, and that was like the thing all the players were doing, like literally everybody. You just had to ask them how they were doing at Fortnite. It was a way you could actually get the players to start talking smack about each other on their own team, was ask them how they're doing on Fortnite. So it's been a phenomenon for years, that's certain. Of course, some of the folks, the reactions we see on Reddit, a lot of people loved it. I mean, of course, some of the fans for Ohio State and Michigan were really hoping the players for the other team were spending their entire week focused on winning this Fortnite tournament rather than necessarily preparing for their game. As it turned out, by the way, I looked it up. I admit this is where I felt a little old. I'm familiar with Twitch, but not that familiar. So it took a while to figure it out. Michigan, a Michigan Team Scope, won the tournament. So Michigan can claim this inaugural victory. Of course, some of the fans were wondering how someone like Coach Harbaugh is even understanding what's going on here. It's like, are my players playing for 2 weeks? It's a Fortnite, right? Trying to understand how this might go on. And, of course, so many people are in esports that a lot of the requests were like, well, will they play no scopes? Will they play using, very esoteric rules with maybe 1887 weapons, or I don't know what game even uses that. Some people were getting blending Modern Warfare, Call of Duty. Lots of people, I think it gets people excited to see all of that and see their favorite players get to have an opportunity to show their acumen. We already talked about it in an earlier episode. We talked about how, Crash Bandicoot was fun to see that integrate.
We got to bring back Crash, right?
So it's a natural blend, I think. You get lots of people. I mean, I don't know. KJ, did you do a lot of gaming or do at all when you were in college yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that was a weekly thing, maybe even a daily thing where we would play, college football or Madden or NBA 2K, something like that. So a couple guys played soccer and hockey too, but yeah, that was a daily occurrence. Another way to be competitive, a lot of arguing on those games. Yeah, I also saw on there that, on the Twitch page, it was 6.6 million viewers that they have or followers on that page. So it probably got a lot of attention with the, adding the college sport angle to it. Let's hop on to this next one. So Utah offensive lineman served duck in a commercial to end childhood hunger before the Utes play Oregon. Utah offensive lineman Satoa Laumea signed a deal with CR England Logistics, and the One Initiative to combat childhood hunger. Laumea's commercial parodies a Food Network cooking show where the football player is cooking for kids. They ask what's to eat before Laumea lifts the pot and reveals a stuffed animal duck and smiles at the camera. It was kind of funny, watching that commercial. I was like, man, this dude, he needs to put a little bit more swag on there. But it was still a good play for, I would say childhood hunger. It brought a lot of attention to that.
Okay, KJ, real quick, when you say bring more swag to it, tell me how you crank up the swag in your opinion. I know it's subjective, but I want to know how when you come to someone and say, swag up, my friend, how do we all swag up?
Just a little bit more energy, right? Just, I felt like in the commercial, and that's what some of this NIL space needs to do. I think some of the players, we gotta get them some training just to, so that I would say the brands get what they want out of the deal too. It's some excitement. I think it was going to bring viewership regardless because of obviously the NIL space and the two teams that were playing. But, as the talent, I think you could always add a little bit more spice to, so people were just excited about it. So I thought it was cool, but I just wanted him to be a little bit more swaggy.
Bobak over there's got some swag. We know that.
Yeah, exactly.
Usually, I wouldn't say as much today, but it's funny too. I agree with that. I always wonder, some of these players are bringing them in for their athletic prowess. So some of them don't necessarily have that natural sense of style and ability to be debonair like yourself, KJ. But at the same time, it was a cute commercial. I mean, it was a stuffed duck, as it turned out. Some folks were kind of thinking it would be hilarious if they actually had him like cook a duck himself. Yeah, do something like that classic scene from A Christmas Story where they just bring out the duck with the head still attached and, freak out the family in that famous scene.
Exactly where my brain went.
And some people wondered, now they need a video of a duck eating a ute. And some people said, well, you could get that. It was called the 2019 Pac-12 championship game. It's been cute. And I think it was a nice idea. I believe the way this kind of worked out was CR England, I think it's CR England, but it's that big trucking company everyone's seeing on the highways. This was already their charitable organization that they were contributing to. And it was kind of a natural blend to bring someone in and just plop them into this situation. I think they picked someone good and for a good cause. And I'm sure, I hope we see more of this. We've been seeing, this is certainly not the first nonprofit NIL kind of idea to sort of promote a charity, but I think this has been one of the other positive ones, because we're talking about how video games are fun, but at the same time, it's also nice to see these charitable things. I think this kind of growth of things like, the mustard shoes we were talking about earlier, or some of these other things. It's fun, it's cute, it's things people are into, things that people get motivated for either by fun or by social interest.
You're listening to NIL Now.
Now we bring in our next guest, our NIL guest segment here, Doug Lemerises, a sports columnist for Cleveland.com and the host of Buckeye Talk podcast. Doug covered Ohio State for Cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer as a beat reporter from 2005 to 2016. The FWAA named him Beat Writer of the Year in 2011. First and foremost, I got to say, my man Doug here's got some pretty sweet headphones going on. I wish you all could see it, but Kevin pointed it out as soon as he logged in. Green blinking earbuds. Where can we find these, my friend?
At the grocery store, once you realize that regular earbuds fall out of your ears and you need the kind with the hooks, and these are the only ones on the shelf. But they work, they're functional, but I cannot get them to stop flashing every 20 seconds. So I apologize.
You're definitely a St. Patty's Day guy, even though that Lesmerises is not St. Patty's. It's not Irish,
no,
I don't think.
It's French.
But you got the green earbuds, you got that $13 million lucky number 13 thing that you put out there for Ohio State. But let's jump into that. So how'd you get that $13 million number going?
So I don't know how I got it, but I signed up to go to an NIL talk that Ryan Day, the Ohio State head football coach, and Gene Smith, the athletic director, were giving to Columbus business people this summer. And I just went and I just sat there and listened. And at that event, Ryan Day, because it was like soon after the thing happened with Nick Saban, right? Where Nick Saban had the conversation sort of with business people in the Tuscaloosa community. And then you're honest, right? When you're in a news conference with reporters, you're careful about what you say. But when you're trying to get money from people, you tell them what's up. So this was a get money from people conversation, and Ryan Day there. And then I was just sitting there. So he said it would take $13 million for Ohio State to keep its roster together. And that what I think was a distinction in how Ohio State viewed it. We obviously hear a lot in NIL about how you can get recruits to come to your school. This was more about what they felt was keeping the guys on the roster so they wouldn't transfer, so they wouldn't get enticements from other schools to leave, say, hey, no, you can make stuff here. Sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around hard numbers, but like that number got out there, and it's not the only number, but it gave some kind of baseline for a program that wants to win national championships. What's it going to take in NIL?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the space right now where there's so many questions and things happening all at once, for someone of that magnitude to step out there and say, 13 is that number. It gives a kind of a baseline that other teams will use. Tennessee, I think they said 25 or something like that is one of the goals that they had. To bring context and to come from Coach Day, I think that was a game changer for the conversation, or a fire starter.
Yeah, and I would be curious to know, the metrics for this, because as these conversations have come up, I feel like coaches are really good at throwing out statistics. They're very metric based. They're very calculated in the things they do. And so now you add this wrinkle of NIL. Where do numbers like this come from? I mean, how do you find this baseline? Like, where does this even come from? And how do you sustain it, really?
Certainly positionally based, and Ryan Day at that thing in the summer also said, I think like $1 million for a top shelf quarterback, right? That's just kind of the going rate. And again, that Nick Saban, I think, had put that number on Bryce Young a year ago, that's kind of the thing. And then I think you just go through and it's just about when you have high level recruits, when you have high level players, and a lot of it is based on, it's hard, Lauren and Kevin, because a lot of it is based on what everybody else is doing. It's like, well, what do you need? Well, it depends what somebody else is offering. So if somebody else is maybe telling one of your players, hey, if you transfer here, we'll give you $500,000. Well, then the number becomes 500,000. What was the number before then? I don't know. The number is whatever somebody will give you. And so I do think the way Ohio State viewed it is, well, it's not necessarily that if we think we have a great player that another school would say, we'll give you 500,000. That doesn't mean Ohio State has to find 500,000 in NIL for that player, but they better find 3, right? They better find enough for the guy to say, well, I like it here. I like other aspects of it, and it's close enough. So I do think it's odd because it's just capitalism now, which is everybody's problem in the old days. Like, it wasn't capitalism in college football. Now it's everybody's setting the market and resetting the market. And your number is whatever it takes to keep a guy versus what he's offered by somebody else. So, it was 13 for Ohio State this summer. Kevin, like you said, maybe it's 20 by now because I think it's constantly shifting.
Yeah, it is constantly shifting. And some teams will play that game where it becomes a bidding war and will drive the number up just to be spiteful. It gets in a dangerous spot when you have a bidding war about a player, That's the space we're in right now.
I think one thing that's interesting, now you add into the wrinkle, because really in college athletics, it's always keeping up with the Joneses, right? And so, it's always competing for facilities. It's competing for, who's got the best of the best. And, now you add this other layer to it with NIL and how that's really just changed the landscape of things. And how do you keep up? And again, I think that $13 million number obviously is going to change. It's going to evolve. It's going to, it's going to be different as the landscape of all this changes. I just wonder if at any point you find that there's like a cap on things. Will there ever be a cap on the amount of money that can be poured into a program? Because, Nick Saban, being one of those, talks about like the rich just keep getting richer. But I think he'll be the first to admit that NIL has certainly had some upside, but also created, some variables, some issues within their program, and not necessarily personal issues, but more or less in many ways, you're starting to kind of level the playing field, and you're starting to see as their season has gone, they're not invincible. Alabama's not invincible, just like no other teams are invincible, and that you can start to bring in this talent from other areas. I'd be interested to kind of get your thoughts on that and how you think NIL has maybe changed the landscape for the talent pool that is sort of available now.
Yeah, it's hard. Because it's not necessarily the best teams that are setting the market, right? And I think we see that everywhere. For instance, you look at coaching salaries. Michigan State gave Mel Tucker $9.5 million a year last year, and then Ohio State reacted to that and gave Ryan Day $9.5 million a year. Well, Michigan State did that because Mel Tucker's a really good coach, and they wanted to keep him, and other people are interested in him. They didn't do it because Michigan State won the national title or that they're expected to compete for a national title. So I think we'll see that too, of some of the teams that are trying to make a jump might be willing to do more in NIL because they're trying to gain on somebody. So then if you're at the top, then what do you do? And I do think the idea, Lauren, of like, will there ever be a cap? This is where I think in the end, the true professionalization of college sports might actually be good for the programs, because then you can have a salary cap. Then you can have things where you're trying to, you have a structure in place. It's the same conversation we have with everything in society. Do you legalize something and then you can tax it and you can regulate it? Or do you just let everybody do whatever they want to do? And maybe people are breaking the rules, but nobody's really enforcing them. So what's the point? It's not going to stop itself, Lauren, but if we get to a point where the system changes and then you're more in an NFL model or an NBA model where there is a limit to what you can do. But right now, there's no limits in college football for anything. And when you're trying to win, certainly the schools themselves are not going to apply those limits because they're trying to make money and win games. And when that's at stake, they'll spend whatever it takes, and their boosters will spend whatever it takes.
Speaking those facts, that's a dose of reality right there. I would say that describes, probably what's going on at most places. Also a good point that you made about, at Michigan State, what they were paying that coach is not the same reason. It's not the same pieces of why they're doing that at Ohio State. They're just resetting the market, and now the Ohio State coach can use that as leverage to get his salary up. So it's the same thing happening in the NIL space. It's good to get all these different perspectives, but where do you see the future of NIL going? Meaning, do you think it's here to stay? Do you think they could pull it back or reel it in, or do you think that it's just going to continue to grow and eventually they'll have some rules and things out there, legislation? But do you think it's here to stay?
So I do think it is here to stay, but not in its current form. And like when Ohio State was talking about it this summer, they were saying, there's like a 5-year window, they think, where it's a little loose, it's a little uncertain, but you've got to keep up for now. That was Ohio State's main point, is you can't get left behind while you're figuring it out. You've got to keep up while you're figuring it out. But I do think in the end, colleges and college athletic departments want to be in control. So I do think all these collectives that we've seen pop up, I think they wind up under the umbrella of the athletic department at some point. And that in the end, when an athletic department is raising money so you can fund and put your name on the defensive coordinator title, or they're raising money for buildings and do you want your name on a building, then they'll be raising money for the NIL, for the collective that's within the athletic department, because there's going to be a point where people don't have infinite money, even the most generous, richest boosters. And at some point, if they're giving money to the collectives, they're not going to give as much money to the athletic department. And I don't think the athletic departments are going to like that, even though the NIL people are helping them get players. So then I think the NCAA will just say, well, then just you be in charge of it. And you'll have your NIL fund within your athletic department, just like you have everything else. And then you can control it. And there's nothing that athletic departments and the NCAA loves to do more than control stuff. So we've gone from controlling what spread you can put on your bagel to controlling how much money your NIL collective raises. But they don't want that in the hands of boosters long term. And then once you're there, aren't you paying players? And once you're that close to paying players, then don't you just pay players? And now we're at the point where we probably should have been all along. But I think this is pushing us towards that. And I do think in the end, what will get, I think, the NCAA and the member schools to do it is they don't really want to do it, but I think in the end, it's going to be better than what this is. Because this is good for the players, good for them making money. But it's a little nuts. Does anyone not think this is a litlittle nuts, that this is how this is supposed to work? You go to school for free. You play for free.
I love this NIL
space. Right. Because it's so if you're smart and entrepreneurial and progressive, there's a lot of opportunity right here. But you know who doesn't love it? ADs, man, athletic directors, man. They want that. They don't want Kevin Jones in control. No.
Control.
They want to be in control. So I think this will push them there eventually. Yeah, but for now, Kevin, you do you, man. Like this is what it's all about, right? Because it is. It's a place for smart people.
I love that. That's so good. Look, before we let you go, Doug, I do want to ask you, it's rivalry week, and say that 3 times fast. Rivalry week, Ohio State, Michigan. Give us your thoughts on that matchup and that game. Obviously, we actually just had a segment prior to you talking about the Fortnite, I guess you call it, I don't know, contest, Fortnite. What do we call it, Dean? Tournament. There we go. Fortnite tournament that went on between the two. Kind of a cool way to sort of bridge the NIL landscape and something unique there. Just your thoughts on this rivalry. You've obviously had the opportunity to cover it for many, 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 many years. So just give us your take for it.
First off, I am pretty good at Fortnite. So maybe I'll try to get in that tournament. Not to brag, but I am, for a 49-year-old guy, I can hold my own.
Okay, well, the bigger question is then, do you rock the green earbuds while playing Fortnite?
I don't. I don't, because I don't like to have like the chat on because I don't want to talk to an 11-year-old while I'm trying to shoot somebody. So like I don't. It's like a fourth grader is like, hey, be my teammate. So that freaks me out. So, but this game this week, I was here. I covered the 1-2 game in 2006 for Ohio State, Michigan, which I think was the peak of the rivalry. I don't think you can get better than that. Troy Smith on the cusp of the Heisman Trophy. Bo Schembechler passes away that week. Everything that went into that. But like this is close. And the thing that's really interesting about this is that Michigan winning last year, Ohio State has spent a year in unfamiliar territory. They're the ones that now are seeking revenge after Michigan's talked a lot about revenge in the Jim Harbaugh era. So that's a change. And there's such a contrast in styles. A passing team versus a running team. That, I think, accentuates a rivalry, right? When there's a contrast in styles and how they go about it. So I'm fascinated to see because I've covered Ohio State for 18 years. This is the only time I've seen something like this because Ohio State lost in 2011 and hired Urban Meyer like a week after they lost the game or a couple days after they lost the game. And it wiped that loss away. So now this is the first time they've had to sit with the loss to Michigan since they lost in 2003. So that's a game changer. So very curious. Ohio State still has more good players, but really curious about the intangibles and how they show themselves on Saturday.
I agree with you on all those points. It's going to be fun. It's one of my favorite times, just to see all the rivalries. I'll be part of the Wisconsin-Minnesota rivalry with the axe being given out. It used to be bacon and now it's axe. It's an axe. So that has certainly changed. But being a part of those, of course, I live in Alabama, part of the Iron Bowl rivalry, have covered many of those over the years. Lots of cool rivalries happening, a great week of college football, lots to be thankful for with it being Thanksgiving. Doug, thank you so much for your expertise, your thoughts, giving us your insight. All great content there. Wishing you and your family a happy Thanksgiving, and we hope to catch up with you again soon.
Sounds good. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there, and thanks for having me.
Big thank you again to Doug Lemerises of Cleveland.com and Buckeye Talk Podcast for joining us this week. We appreciate you. You can follow him at Doug Lemerises on Twitter. And also follow us on NIL Now Show on Instagram and Twitter or on Reddit at NIL. Tell a friend. Let us know what you think about the show and find next week's episode out wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you to Bobak, Hyeri, and the Reddit College Football team for their help. You can follow them on Twitter, Reddit College Football, or on their Reddit Football channel. I'm Lauren Sisler. My co-host is Kevin Jones. Big thanks to our audio engineer, Colin Schmaling, our associate producer, Dean Zolkowski, and our executive producers, Richard Diamond, Selena Roberts, and Scott Broder. We'll see you again next week. Peace and happy Thanksgiving, y'all.
Thanks for listening to NIL Now, presented by Headline Studio and Reddit.